A lot of people have never had money and they don't need money. So we get rejected like that a lot because, you know what? They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about your money. They never had it. They're never going to have it.
When they discovered Frank Fritz lifeless on his bathroom floor, no one was prepared for what was hidden in his garage. What secrets could a simple garage hold? Behind that humble door were over 75 vintage motorcycles, including a jaw-dropping 1947 Indian Chief prototype valued at $250,000. But that's not all. Parked beside it was Aerosmith's long-lost tour van. How did it end up there? Tucked away in the corner was a prototype Yoda from Star Wars, believed to have been destroyed by George Lucas himself. What other treasures might have been hiding in plain sight? It wasn't the rare collectibles that stunned people the most. It was the stack of handwritten journals. Within those pages lay a haunting revelation: the truth behind Frank Fritz's final days, the real reason behind his departure from American Pickers, and a stunning scheme to rob him of his $6 million fortune. Frank Fritz's journey began in Davenport, Iowa, in 1963. From an early age, he stood apart. While other kids rode bikes or traded baseball cards, Frank immersed himself in a personal museum of rocks, stamps, coins, even old beer cans, carefully arranged in his bedroom. His parents, Bill and Susan, viewed his habits as eccentric but harmless. But to Frank, every object had a story, a voice from the past begging to be remembered. He didn't follow fads. He sought out the overlooked. He once confessed to saving used razor blades and staples from school papers. Strange to some, but it revealed his innate ability to spot value in the mundane. He attended Sudlow Intermediate and later Bettendorf High, where his fate shifted. In 8th grade, Frank met Mike Wolfe. The pair bonded instantly over their shared passion for forgotten treasures. Weekends became treasure hunts at flea markets and garage sales. Though some teachers believed he had the smarts for a conventional career, Frank felt otherwise. College never called to him. Instead, he pursued history with his hands, literally. After high school, he became a fire inspector, working across Iowa for 25 years. Yet the collector in him thrived. At 16, he spent $4,100 on a 1964 Harley-Davidson. Not a splurge, but a piece of living history. Over time, he amassed more than 100 vintage bikes and built a barn to house them. Long before television fame, Frank was a respected name among bikers and collectors alike, driven by something rare, a true picker's eye. Frank Fritz lived a life split in two: fire inspector by profession, antique picker by passion. This dual existence didn't just define him, it honed him. By day, inspecting buildings sharpened his attention to detail. He learned to scan rooms with intense focus, spotting the smallest anomalies. That same skill transferred seamlessly into the world of antiques. Whether in cluttered barns or chaotic flea markets, Frank wasn't guessing, he was methodical. Years of identifying structural flaws gave him an edge when it came to uncovering hidden treasures. That instinct, trained and tested, made him a natural on American Pickers, where seeing value in the overlooked was the entire game. The turning point came not with a grand discovery, but with a modest find. Frank purchased a small item for $15 and flipped it for $475. It wasn't just the profit that mattered, it was the proof. His years of knowledge, curiosity, and passion had real-world value. Inspired, Frank made a bold decision in 2002. He walked away from fire inspection and opened his own store, Frank's Finds, in Savannah, Illinois. But this was no ordinary antique shop. Housed in a former opera house with a bar still intact, the space was more like a museum, a time capsule brimming with firefighting memorabilia, vintage tools, and eccentric oddities. Dimly lit and slightly musty, the shop felt like a place where time had stood still. For Frank, that was the charm. Authentic, imperfect, and real. Just like him. Visitors were often overwhelmed by the maze-like layout, but true collectors saw it for what it was, a treasure trove. The store became a destination for the curious, the nostalgic, and those who understood Frank's unique vision. Around this same time, Mike Wolfe began filming their picking adventures, convinced it could become a TV show. Frank, however, was hesitant. He loved his shop. It was safe. It was his. But one sale changed everything. Frank bought a small fraternal badge for $115 and later sold it for $1,450. That rush, the thrill of the hunt and the win, was unlike anything he'd felt. He called it his gambler's high. That single moment tipped the scale. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing the story behind every forgotten object. And when the cameras finally rolled, Frank didn't need to perform. He just had to be himself. The man who saw history where others saw junk. That familiar rush, part instinct, part excitement, paired with Mike Wolfe's persistent encouragement, eventually nudged Frank Fritz to take a risk. He closed up his beloved shop, loaded his gear, and joined Mike on the road. Their early trips were spontaneous, recorded with little more than a dream and a camera. But those raw, unscripted adventures caught the attention of producers, laying the groundwork for what would become a pop culture phenomenon. When American Pickers debuted on the History Channel in January 2010, everything changed. The show was an instant hit, drawing over 3 million viewers, one of the highest-rated premieres in the network's history. Overnight, Frank transitioned from a small-town antique store owner to a household name. His calm, grounded demeanor and stocky, bearded appearance made him the perfect foil to Mike's tall, fast-talking, high-energy personality. Audiences fell in love with their dynamic. Soon, fans were lining up to meet them. During a visit to the California Surf Museum that October, a massive crowd gathered outside. Frank, ever modest and a bit shy, looked around and asked, "Why are all these people here?" Still, he stayed for hours, signing every autograph and meeting every fan with quiet grace. Within 8 months, American Pickers reached a staggering 5.3 million viewers. Frank wasn't just a sidekick. He was an essential part of the show's success. Traveling in a white Mercedes van, later replaced with a Ford Transit, the duo followed no script, no strict plan. The spontaneity was the soul of the series. In September 2011, they rolled through southern Maine and stumbled across Champion Auto in Arundel. Owner Mario Bennett, a fan of the show, couldn't believe it when Frank and Mike pulled into his yard. Frank gravitated toward oil cans and gas station signs. Mike beelined for the motorcycles and gear. They spent 5 days there, chasing leads and stories. That kind of organic adventure is what made the show work. It felt real because it was. Frank and Mike balanced each other perfectly. Mike, the enthusiastic seeker, and Frank, the thoughtful collector. While Mike pursued old Volkswagens and bikes, Frank preferred rare toys, oil collectibles, and motorcycle memorabilia. Their chemistry was the show's backbone. Frank's passion for motorcycles didn't start on TV. As a teen, he bought his first Harley-Davidson, a 1964 model, and built up a collection of about 35 vintage bikes over the years. His barn, filled with rare treasures like a 1938 Indian 4-cylinder and a Von Dutch customized Harley VW hybrid, wasn't just storage. It was his private museum, a testament to decades of dedication and heart. Years before he ever laid eyes on it in person, Frank Fritz had spotted the rare motorcycle in a magazine. He never imagined he'd find it at a simple yard sale. But there it was. For Frank, that bike wasn't just a hunk of metal. Like so many treasures in his collection, it held a deeper meaning. Each item told a story. And for Frank, storytelling was the heart of collecting. In 2013, Frank decided it was time to share his passion and knowledge with the world in a way that extended beyond television. He authored a book titled How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles. But this wasn't a book written only for seasoned collectors or motorcycle mechanics. It was for anyone with an interest in vintage bikes, whether they were experienced or just getting started. True to Frank's personality, the book was warm, accessible, and filled with humor. He offered practical advice on everything from identifying valuable finds to negotiating prices, alongside anecdotes and photos from his personal collection. Frank saw the book as more than just a guide. It was a legacy. He wanted to pass down the stories behind the bikes and teach readers to appreciate the history and soul of the machines. His passion extended beyond motorcycles. After spending 25 years as a fire inspector, Frank developed a deep interest in firehouse memorabilia. That career had given him access to places few others could explore. Old fire stations, abandoned buildings, forgotten equipment rooms. He began collecting relics from that world. Brass fire extinguishers, leather helmets, vintage alarm bells, and more. On American Pickers, his enthusiasm was obvious whenever the team encountered anything related to firefighting. It wasn't just another category for him, it was deeply personal. What truly set Frank apart as a collector was his emotional connection to the objects. To him, picking wasn't just about finding rare things, it was about finding stories. He often spent more time learning about an item's history from the owner than haggling over price. He treasured the narrative behind each piece, especially those that reflected the daily lives of ordinary Americans. Tools, toys, household goods, war memorabilia. When something had a powerful backstory, he sometimes donated it to museums, particularly if it honored veterans or fallen soldiers. But behind Frank's easygoing charm and love of collecting was a private battle. For over 36 years, he struggled with Crohn's disease, a chronic condition that causes inflammation of the digestive tract and leads to intense pain and fatigue. Despite this, Frank kept going, even during grueling shoots for American Pickers. He rarely let the cameras capture the discomfort he endured. Eventually, though, the toll of illness, stress, and personal issues began to surface. In 2017, Frank was arrested for driving on the wrong side of the road. He later admitted to mixing alcohol with Xanax, a prescription he used to manage anxiety. He failed a sobriety test and was charged with operating while intoxicated. Frank would later explain that constant public attention had left him overwhelmed. The scrutiny, the pressure, it all wore him down. Though he avoided jail time through a plea deal, the damage to his public image was hard to ignore. Around the same time, his relationship with longtime co-star Mike Wolfe deteriorated. By 2021, Frank admitted they hadn't spoken in over 2 years. What hurt him most wasn't losing his spot on the show. It was the silence. After a major back surgery, Mike never reached out. Frank compared their dynamic to being in a band with Steven Tyler. "You're never going to be the front man," he said. When Mike eventually posted a heartfelt message online claiming he missed Frank, Frank wasn't convinced. He believed someone else had written it and said he couldn't recall a time Mike had ever said anything kind about him face to face. For years, the rift between Frank Fritz and his longtime friend and co-star Mike Wolfe remained unresolved. However, in May 2023, during Memorial Day weekend, the two finally came face to face again, thanks to the intervention of a mutual friend. It was a step toward reconciliation, but the weight of their shared past and personal struggles still lingered heavily. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Frank faced one of his most challenging periods. A seemingly routine mishap at home, injuring his back while moving something, quickly spiraled into something far more serious. The injury required surgery, but the timing was devastating. As lockdowns intensified and isolation grew, Frank's physical pain was soon accompanied by emotional turmoil, including the collapse of personal relationships. He began using opioids for pain relief, but what began as medical management devolved into a full-blown addiction. Mike Wolfe later likened the experience to watching a storm slowly tear a loved one apart. Despite interventions, heartfelt pleas, and support from friends and the American Pickers team, Frank repeatedly insisted he was fine, even when he clearly wasn't. The producers eventually offered Frank a chance to return to the show on one condition. He needed to pass a drug test. He couldn't. That failure effectively ended his long run with the show. Frank's final episode aired in March 2020, and though it initially seemed like just a break, he never returned. Frank publicly claimed his absence was due to surgery and delays caused by the pandemic. But by July 2021, Mike confirmed that Frank would not be returning. Although Mike shared a public message wishing Frank well, many, Frank included, felt it was superficial. Behind the scenes, Frank had undergone extensive surgery that left him with 185 stitches and 2 rods in his spine. He insisted he was fully recovered and eager to return to work, but the network had already moved on. The decision devastated him. He felt discarded and forgotten. Then came July 14th, 2022, the day Frank's life would change forever. A friend walked into Frank's farmhouse in Iowa to find him lying on the floor, unable to speak. He had suffered a massive stroke. Emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, but the stroke had severely damaged his brain. He lost significant cognitive and motor functions, requiring a lengthy hospital stay, followed by placement in a nursing home. Even after returning home, Frank's health continued to decline. His need for constant care and the ongoing medical emergencies, including a severe case of pneumonia, left him unable to make decisions for himself. In August 2022, a court-appointed guardian, his close friend Chris Davis, took over his personal affairs while a bank managed his $6 million estate. With medical bills reaching $30,000 per month and Frank earning only $60,000 annually, discussions began about selling his antiques to cover the costs. As Frank's health worsened, his friend Mike Wolfe was by his side during his final moments. Following Frank's death, a legal battle arose over his estate. His father, Bill Fritz, contested Frank's 2023 will, claiming Frank was no longer capable of making decisions and demanding control over the estate, including its valuable collection of motorcycles. As Frank Fritz's estate faced legal battles and his prized collection drew the attention of collectors and auction houses, a deeper truth emerged. His legacy wasn't about wealth. It was about honoring history. Each item in his collection told a story, reflecting his deep reverence for American craftsmanship and forgotten eras. While disputes arose over who should inherit his estate, those who knew Frank understood that his true passion lay in preserving the past. Whether through motorcycles, tools, or memorabilia, Frank saw value in the stories behind every piece. His legacy will live on through the history he worked tirelessly to protect. In the end, whether his antiques are housed in museums, passed down to collectors, or sold at auction, the heart of Frank's legacy remains untouched. He was a storyteller at heart, a guardian of history who believed the past was worth saving. And through the items he rescued and restored, Frank Fritz will be remembered long after the courtroom battles are over. If you found this story meaningful, like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about the people and treasures that shape our past. Thanks for watching.